Hello, and thank you for joining EarthEcho International's virtual event, Stages of STEM, Generations of Innovation. My name is Olivia Blondheim, and I'm a PhD student at the University of South Florida's College of Marine Science and a member of EarthEcho International's Youth Leadership Council and Board of Directors. EarthEcho International is a nonprofit founded on the belief that youth have the power to change the planet. Our free programs and resources have reached more than 2 million people in 146 countries. This live session is part of National Biodiversity Teach-In, an annual event that takes place every February. Each year, students from Elgin High School in Illinois work together with their teachers to create a great series of virtual events. Visit nationalbiodiversityteachin.com to see their entire lineup and to register. Just a reminder that you can send in questions anytime for our experts, and we will answer those throughout today's event. If you're joining in Zoom, please use the Q&A feature, and if you're on YouTube, please use the comment section to ask your question of our experts. Now let's get started by introducing our terrific panel of experts. Dr. Shefali, let's start with you. Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you. I'm really excited to be here and have a chance to speak with all of you. So my name is Shefali Mehta, and I am a first-generation Indian American. My parents emigrated here from India back in the 70s. I'm born and raised in Connecticut. And from an early age, I loved plants and nature. And so I knew I wanted to work with them, but I also really loved math and science. And so I went to New York University to study neuroscience. And of course, within 2 weeks of getting there, I switched over to economics, which, I'm sure that's a whole other discussion of how those connected. But I ended up getting I earned my bachelor's in economics at NYU, my MPhil from University of Cambridge, and then my master's in statistics and my PhD from the University of Minnesota. And that was in agricultural and environmental economics. So I have had the chance to work in ag and environment for almost 20 years now. I've worked in every continent but Antarctica, and I spent 8 years in the private sector and also worked with a lot of nonprofits and realized I really want to take all of this learning and bring it to the organizations that I love and working with the people I believe in. So I founded my own business, Open Rivers, and it started in 2017. And we have our employees, and we've really grown quite a bit in this last year, and I really love working with organizations around the world on how to do better and really improve the world around us. So thank you.
That's amazing. And now next up, we have Amani. So let's hear a bit about you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amani Weber Schultz. I am a shark scientist and also the Chief Financial Officer of Minorities in Shark Sciences. I was born and raised in San Francisco, California, so science in the ocean was a really big part of my life from the moment I was born. I earned my bachelor's from Rutgers University in New Jersey in marine science, and I'm currently doing a fellowship with Field School in Miami, learning more about sharks, helping them teach their courses, and expanding my knowledge of shark research. And hopefully in the fall, I will be starting a PhD program studying shark morphology.
That's fantastic, and we're excited to hopefully be welcoming you to the joys of grad school very soon. Now, next up, we have Lela. So let's hear a bit about you.
Yeah, so hey everyone, my name is Lela Devine, and I am a senior in high school, currently based in Hilo, Hawaii, with a background in environmental advocacy, marine sciences, and pharmacology. On the advocacy side, I am an EarthEcho Youth Leadership Council member, and I also do work in outreach with World Ocean Day. And my research side emphasizes the interdisciplinary connection in utilizing our marine environment for medical-based research by scuba diving and collecting sponges and corals, deriving isolates from them, and quantifying compounds that are effective in combating prostate and ovarian cancer cell lines. I started doing research on the marine side of things and then moved on into pharmacology and biochemistry. And all the while, I'm the only female and the only scuba diver, as well as the only high schooler in a postdoctoral setting. And through all of this, I've also coming in from a first-generation college student perspective. And so I have an interesting outlook and dynamic on being a young woman and a growing individual in academia. So I'm super excited to have these conversations with you all today.
That's fantastic. And last but not least, we have Dr. Julie Vecchio.
Hi, everybody. My name is Julie. I am a marine fisheries biologist. I am currently based in the city of St. Petersburg, Florida. I am originally from the Detroit area in Michigan, so nowhere near the ocean, but I've been working and living on the coast for over 20 years now. My current position is as a biologist for the state of Florida, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. And my job is essentially to provide the data for fisheries stock assessments. So those are the decisions that are made about how many fish you can keep and catch of different species. I take the data that we collect as a group and I summarize it so that it can be used to make those kinds of decisions.
So as you can see, we have a phenomenal panel here today. And as over the next hour, I'm going to be asking a series of questions for each of our panelists, and we're going to just have a conversation. So I'll be sure throughout to ask questions coming in from our live audience. So again, you can send those in via YouTube in the comment section or on the Q&A feature on Zoom. But to start us out, my first question is, what does mentor mean to you? And we'll start with Amani.
So I kind of briefly defined what I would consider to be a mentor. The overarching thing is I consider a mentor to be someone who wants what's best for me and understands my interests, and is able to give me criticisms of mistakes I've made, things I could do better, and do that all in a positive way without making me feel as though I'm not good at something, I can't complete something, I can't move forward. And I kind of define mentor as having short-term and long-term mentors. So to briefly describe that, a short-term mentor for me would be, for example, my science teacher in high school. She was super useful for me when I was applying to colleges, trying to figure out what area of science I wanted to go into. She read college essays for me. But then when I went to college, I found other mentors and kind of lost touch with her. So she's considered a short-term mentor because she had an impact on me at some point in my life that helped me pursue a career that I want to go into. And long-term mentors are people who have consistently been in my life, consistently helped me move forward in my career throughout college. Some of those people are professors, my parents, some friends that I've made. Basically, a mentor can be absolutely anyone, from a high school teacher, a therapist, your parents, family, friends, college professors, any kind of person that you have a connection with and you feel comfortable learning from them and you want to learn from them and you're excited by the things that they might be able to tell you.
Absolutely. And I love that you differentiated a little bit between long-term mentors and short-term mentors, because I think each plays such an equally important part of your career. But of course, like as you're going through different stages of your career, you're going to have some mentors who are more pertinent to that part of your career than others. So I love that you kind of distinguish between the two of those. So next up we have Lela.
Yeah, so I'd say to me, a mentor is representative of a support system that I can have both inside and outside of the classroom and the lab setting. To me, these are usually individuals who have been influential in my career path in a multitude of ways, who come from these interdisciplinary backgrounds and are also friends that I can look towards at the same time. A specific example to me would include two teachers who have supported me on both the environmental perspective as well as the chemistry and pharmacology perspective. Ms. Whitney Argaki has been my AP Environmental Science teacher, AP Research teacher, and my science fair advisor for 4 years. And Dr. Chad Higa is also a co-teacher, both of which who are my friends and mentors and great individuals that I've looked up to. This is just a really cute moment that I kind of think depicts a support system. It was my qualification for ISEF, for any of you science fair nerds, which is the International Science and Engineering Fair, in which Dr. Higa was actually the MC at the award ceremony, and Ms. Argaki was supporting me. And so we kind of snapped this really, really cute photo at the spur of the moment, but also someone in the audience snapped that outside perspective of the three of us all together, which I think is a really, really cool representation of the amazing support system that I've been so thankful to have. In terms of like the people that I've been able to look up to, people I've been able to get advice from, talk to, and kind of supporting me all along my path of high school.
For sure. And I love that you kind of show this perspective of, being there during your successes, because I think that's such a big part of mentorship is it's not just getting you through the difficult times, but it's also being there to help you celebrate when you do achieve the things that you're hoping to achieve. So I completely agree. I have so many mentors in my own life who have been there through some of the highest moments and also the lowest moments, which is so important. So then next up we have Julie. Oh, and Julie, you may be on mute.
Sorry. I consider mentors to be just a network of trusted advisors. And the one thing that I really try to remember all the time is that there are a wide variety of different styles of mentors. And I really liked the long-term versus short-term mentor idea, but also just to remember that mentors can be there from any stage of life, from a peer mentor, somebody who's actually of your same age or your same status in life, to someone who is much more advanced in their career, and they can play different roles. I think that's another thing that a lot of times people forget, is that different mentors might play different roles. And one person does not have to be both your friend and an advocate for you personally or professionally. Different people can play those different kinds of roles. You know, you don't have to find one person that can fit all of those things at the exact same time. And I think that that's really, really important. Now, obviously, the people who are going to sort of sponsor you or be able to move you in a direction or help you get to places, you know, they have to like you, but you don't have to be close friends in order for that to occur. You can have that kind of cup or that role filled by different individuals within your life.
Absolutely. And I like how you use the term like network or a team of mentors, because I think that is such a big thing. Is I think you're never going to find, I mean, you sometimes in a rare instance will find somebody who kind of fits all of those roles, but for a large part, you're going to have different people who really play those different roles in your life. So I think that's such a good point. Is that's why it's so important just not to have one mentor, but to have, especially during different stages of your career, multiple mentors. And last but not least, Shefali.
Absolutely, and I just want to add to, I really agree with what the other panelists shared in terms of mentorship. And I think it's really important to remember that mentors wear a lot of hats, right? And I like that point about they can come in any form, and they will evolve and shift as you do through your life, and I think that's really important that we recognize they are very diverse. And it's also important to realize, just as the other panelists have said, this is not about titles or authority. Your mentors can be anyone. It really is about, I think it's more about what they do for you. And I've always found the ones that I really gravitate towards are those, they really start by listening. And it's always just important on any side of mentorship, like really hearing, supporting and caring, meeting me where I am and recognizing that's different in different points in our career, different points in our lives. And I think really strong mentors really see you and hear you, and they're there to meet you there and help. And then really share what I want to hear and what I need to hear. And I think it's really important, because there are also people, ideally, if they've done the other three on this list, listen, supporting, caring, and meeting me, then they also are going to be able to be honest in areas where we do need those changes in that feedback. So I have a picture here. It can be, as we've mentioned, family, and my cousins, Manish and Ketan, have played a huge role in my life. And it's been fascinating to look and see how that changed over time from a mentorship and a support perspective.
I love that you mentioned the listening, portion of that too, because I think that's such a big thing, is that there's been times in my life where I have wanted particular things and thought that I wanted to go in a certain direction. And then I've had mentors come in and be like, no, well, you talk a lot about this, or you talk a lot about, you spend a lot of your free time doing outreach, or have you considered going a different direction? And I think those are such crucial moments, because you really need people in your career to be honest with you and to know you for who you are, to help you kind of guide in that right direction. So I think that's a really fantastic point. So now that we kind of have defined what a mentor is for each of you, let's move to our next question, which is, how has mentorship influenced your career? And we will start with Julie.
Yeah, so I just picked one specific instance that I can really think of where mentorship really did, essentially propel my career in the direction that it has gone for the last 15 years. So I was always the kid and the young adult who loved the ocean, but I spent quite a bit of time doing outdoor education and other types of things until I got to a graduate program where I learned about fisheries and fisheries science and just what the impact was of fisheries. And I was blown away. I'd never even considered it as a possible option. And so I was lucky throughout my master's program to work with some amazing individuals at the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources, And they were fantastic mentors and amazing people. I learned so much from them. But of course, you know, I eventually had to graduate and I had to leave and I had to get a job. And I came into the office one day and one of my major mentors said, "Hey, you're looking for a job, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, I just met this guy from Florida. We were in Maryland together. We were trying to help the state of Maryland, you know, make their new fisheries program, blah, blah, blah. And this guy from Florida, he needs some people to work for him. So just give him a call." And so that was literally pretty much how I got my job in Florida and where I've essentially been working ever since. And so just the connections between your mentors and the connection that you have with those people, again, that advocacy role that they can play is just really, really essential in moving your career in different ways.
I love that your mentor was looking out for job opportunities for you, because that's such a big role of a mentor. Is like there's the supportive emotional side of it, that's, you know, you want somebody who's going to encourage you and help you to develop that way. But there's also just the practical side of it too, is like as you're starting in your career, you really do need people who can advocate for you and help you make those connections that you might not necessarily have. So I love that you shared that story, because I think it does really, you know, exemplify how important having that network is. And so next up we have Amani.
So one of the things that I've always struggled with that mentors have absolutely helped me with is believing in myself and the things that I'm good at. Mentors recognize when you excel in certain areas and they know the areas that you might need more help with. And the thing that mentors have done for me is really point out to me the things that I'm doing a good job at and then helping me figure out how I can apply those in my career. I absolutely struggled in college with things like grades. And I worked in the same lab for all 4 years of my undergrad, and my PI was basically like, "I know you have a really hard time in these classes, but you are really good at organizing the lab, like rearranging procedures and coming up with better ways to do the research that we're doing. You're really outgoing and you're good at talking with people. And your grades are not going to define you in your career, and they're not going to keep you from being able to do something else." So mentors have really, I'd say, helped me with my self-esteem in terms of my abilities as a researcher. And then they've helped me improve on those and become really good at them. So becoming a shark scientist, I had another shark scientist say to me, "Hey, you are really good at field work. It like makes sense in your brain. You're really good at figuring out which lines need to go out first, how to organize the deck so no one's tripping over gear." And that's something that I hadn't realized about myself. And so her, you know, pointing that out to me really helped me figure out, oh, I'd love to have field work be an important part of my career. And, you know, mentors, all of my mentors have been really useful for me in regards to that.
You bring up such an important part about, you know, grades not kind of really shaping who you are as a scientist. And I think each of us as scientists on this panel probably have very diverse and different skills that we bring to the table. And I think that's so important, is like, even when I was, you know, going through, you know, high school and into college, like I always struggled with math a lot, and I wasn't the, you know, the top of the class when it came to things like chemistry, or, you know, they scared me at times. And so I think it was really a big thing, is because if I had just listened to what my grades said, or what, you know, those particular professors in those classes said, they probably wouldn't have identified that I could be a great scientist. But I had so many amazing mentors who were there when I was in the field and were there when I was, you know, doing different things like in the lab that were helpful. And so I think that's a really big point that you mentioned, is that there's so many different skills that make up being a scientist, that you don't just have to have stellar grades or one particular skill. So I think that's a really good point. And of course, mentorship helps with identifying those skills. So next we have Lela.
I will have to say, to add on to Amani's point here, I did have a teacher one time who I kind of took this outlook with me, like when I went further down into pursuing my career. They told me that your GPA is a figment of your imagination, right? And in a lot of senses, it is, because a lot of the times it boils down to like how focused you are in like and honing in on certain parts of your career field, right? And how it's more about applying the knowledge rather than just doing good on a test, right? A class can be weighted to the point where like tests are 100 points, weighted 20%, and homework and projects are like 5 points, which I've been in classes that have had like those ridiculous weight scales. And like your grade might not be the best, but it doesn't mean that you can't do that subject, right? It just means that maybe you're more prone to actually applying it in certain scenarios or doing other types of things. But anyways, back to mentorship influencing my personal career. I will have to say I was born in California but raised in Hawaii, and I can say that both my dad and my dive master were really important mentors in my career towards starting and pursuing diving. Since then, my passions have kind of tumbled into place as I've explored more and more into what I want to do in the future. And through that, I've encountered different types of mentors. So that's inclusive of going into a professional lab setting and speaking with grad students and PIs about different paths of research that I can take. Also, something kind of like a cool experience is experiences in speaking and expanding out at different audiences and conferences, symposiums, science fairs, speaking events, you name it. They've allowed me to really be able to converse with individuals in the professional field in regards to both my work and theirs, which has provided me mentorship and insight and understanding of where I want to go. So that kind of touches upon Amani's point of like short-term mentors. These are people, you know, I've maybe only talked to for like a span of like a couple of days at a time, maybe at a specific event. But, you know, being able to have those conversations and spark those notes of like, oh, what are you doing? Oh, yeah, well, how does this link to the career that I want to go in? You know, that's kind of like those important conversations that you should keep on having, because that's a form of mentorship, like as you're going along, that can really help you. And these instances of outreach have also translated over with like me going into more like scientific writing rather than only doing lab work, you know, going into publication-based work as well. And I think that mentorship, even like the tiniest pieces of advice from people, they've allowed me to shape myself down this interdisciplinary path. And that's kind of like all encompassing, you know, you see the advocacy on the environmental section, exploration, research, outreach, all of that has kind of come together as a result of different people at different points in my life.
I also love that you mentioned having like sometimes mentorship is literally just a couple of days. And you don't have to go to a scientific conference or meet somebody in a professional setting. Like a lot of times, you know, I've just emailed people that I was interested in learning more about their experiences in the field. And so I think that's a really good point, is that, you know, you don't have to just go to a conference to meet somebody, but you can talk to somebody else at your school. You can talk to somebody else, like send an email to another professor who's doing that work. And even if you don't end up going in that direction, it's just this opportunity to learn more about what your interests are and how they fit into this field. So that's a really fantastic point. And next we have Shefali.
So, you know, I'd like to just add to absolutely, I think mentors play so many phenomenal roles. And actually one of the things that's really stood out to me, and I picked 4, just to give you an example of, starting with Barbara, who was my high school teacher. I was actually her first independent study teacher. So one thing I want to also point out is we forget that these are relationships, they're connections. There's giving and learning that's happening continuously on all sides. And I think when the best relationships are the ones that we go into them with that in mind, right? And I think the mentors also who go into that from that perspective enjoy them, and you learn a lot. So Barbara was my high school teacher. She was a librarian, and she has stayed in my life through those years and been a very influential person and just a really strong kind of advocate, cheerleader, thought partner. And then next to her is Rafaela. So she was actually a fellow student, my neighbor at Selwyn College in Cambridge. She actually went from being an English teacher to an orangutan researcher. So that's a whole separate story. That's amazing, mid-career switch. And she did phenomenal work and really encouraged me to take risks. So been in my life for quite some time. And then below I have 2 of my professors. So Galen was my stats professor, and met him quite early on in my PhD studies, and Rob was my entomology professor. And so I work with them both. And here's what's fascinating. We talked about like short-term, long-term, you know, how people come in and out of your life, and how influential they can be. So I'm actually vegetarian, I'm vegan. My family is Jane, and but I ended up working in hunting, which is kind of, you know, that's a beauty of grad school. And we'll talk a little bit about, I think later, about suggestions, but you know, it's all about trying and going after risks. Well, later in my career, I had the chance to actually serve a hunting organization, and I remember thinking, this is crazy. And they had invited me to the board, and Barbara said, go for it, take the risk. And I think watching me and knowing me and her seeing value where I couldn't was phenomenal. Rafaela did likewise when I was debating what to do after Cambridge. And we had a friend who was running for parliament in Sweden, and she said, you want to see him succeed? You don't really care about politics, but you're going to learn a lot. So I went to Sweden and I helped him, and he became the youngest parliament member ever elected to Sweden, which was amazing. And I loved just being part of that. And then Galen and Rob, and we talk about how we switch roles, and I'm old enough into my career that we switch roles many times, I'll say that. So they were my advisors, and good mentors train you to be the best of who you are. And I credit them both for seeing in me what I couldn't see in myself. But later on in my life, they actually asked me to be their advisors for both of their respective boards and councils. So I think that, so it's interesting because that also continued to help my career, but I was also in a position where I was able to continue to work with them and help them. And so I think when we step back and we look at the long picture, and this is over, I'm talking about 25, 30 years, is things can evolve and they open doors and they change who we are fundamentally. So, I think one of those is like, be open. You never know who's going to help you. You don't know what they're going to look like or sound like, but they will fundamentally change your life.
Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned also like being able to later on, once you were in your career, giving back to and being able to also kind of serve in that role as well. And so I think it really is a give and take relationship. And in the beginning, they may be mentoring you more than you're, really giving back at that moment. But once you're really, that's kind of the beauty of mentorship, is that once you've kind of gone on in your career, you have the skills then to kind of really give back, and it's more of an equal relationship. So I think that's fantastic. Okay, so now, and I also just want to remind everybody, you can be sending in questions throughout. I do see one question, but we're going to ask that one a little bit later. But like I said, there's, the Zoom chat is open, the Q&A function, and also on YouTube, you can use the chat function. So definitely feel free to ask questions throughout as well. So my next question is, are there any hardships you've had to overcome, and how did you really face those hardships? And first up, I'm gonna call on Lela.
Yeah, so I've been placed in a really interesting dynamic, kind of trying to like build a spot for myself, and working my way through that interdisciplinary path, as I mentioned earlier. Something that I also mentioned when I was introducing myself is I'm in an interesting lab dynamic in which I'm also the only female and the only high schooler in a postdoctoral setting. And of all of that, I'm also the only scuba diver. And so I've been placed in some really, really interesting instances in which it's allowed me to really grow and build upon how to be creative in my own analysis methods. I do have to say, it's kind of interesting. It's an interesting sight to see like a little freshman girl in high school come back to this like fully decked out pharmaceutical lab, like soaking wet with these like samples after a dive, and like start to give directions on like, these are some of like the next steps that we should be taking. I think that was one of the first points and one of like the first challenges that I've actually gone through in trying to be able to voice myself in a specific settings. But then also there's been like other things, right? Like I have an experience in a lot of science-based competitions. Like that's where I started off, starting in middle school and going on into high school. But I've given full-length talks encompassing 1.5 years of research in front of panels of PhDs. And I've been doubted in front of audiences as to whether or not I did my own research, because I had thanked my support system at the end, which, by the way, always thank your support system. Just have to always thank your support system, because chances are like you wouldn't be where you are today if it wasn't for them. Like I'd thank people that I'd gotten insight from at the end in the acknowledgements. And it was this one thing that had just kind of briefly popped up like, oh, you seem to have a lot of people in your acknowledgements. How much of this research did you actually do? But science is like a thing where you need that network of people, right? You need that support around you that you're able to build and communicate with others to hopefully try to convey your research in a way that is understandable to your broader audiences, right? And so that's something that was a challenge that I had previously faced that I've kind of been able to learn from a lot. And I've also had to balance, because I'm in high school, like the course schedule, right? Your extracurriculars, other assignments, figuring out college applications as a first-gen student is always an interesting one also. But, these instances of like being withheld data and held back because of my educational level of only being in high school, it really made me more creative in my approaches in towards of innovating my own analysis methods and stuff like that. And so I put on the board, like the challenges you face, they lead to creativity. The challenges that you face can lead to, increased drive, and it can lead to perseverance, right? It can really lead to finding those ways to move forward in your life. And that's something that's really important that I've learned along the way.
Lela, and I think you take such a positive attitude towards that, and I commend you for that, because I think it is really important to mention, that there are ways to overcome those issues. But I mean, it is really hard having to assert yourself, no matter what your age is or what you're, especially being a woman in science. Like, it is really hard at times when you're questioned. So, like, yes, there is ways to be creative and overcome that, but I also just want to say, we should be working towards a world where we aren't questioned for that, and they should take that at face value. And also the fact that it's better to, mention more people in your credits than less. It's far more commendable for you, because realistically, you're actually taking, you're not taking credit away from anybody who helped. Whereas other times people don't put as many people, and then there's actually hurt feelings later. So I think that you're doing a fantastic job, but I'm also want to say that I'm sorry that, you and, I'm sure many of us have experienced that, because it is a challenge that we do face in STEM. So then my next person is Shefali.
So I don't know if you ever heard this, but they say that for the top 5 most stressful life events include death of a loved one, divorce, moving, major illness or injury, and job loss. And between 2015 and 2019, I experienced all of those in multiples. So it was, there are always barriers, and life has bumps. And sometimes I guess life throws all of them at you at the same time. And I will just say, as I went through it, had a serious head injury in an Uber car accident, and had memory and vision loss, and still years to recover. I moved across country, bought an old house, money pit, went through loss of several family members, lots of odd job changes. And so it was rough. I will be honest. There were moments where I didn't think I could come up for air. There were moments where I would look around and just wonder, when is the next shoe going to drop? It's almost that you get into this pattern that nothing seems to come up. And then you really look around and go, okay, well, life is tough, and what can I do to get through this, right? And so I think there are a couple things that really helped, not just then, but I think in general when we face various barriers, and hopefully not all on the scale I'm describing, but in all the different realms that they come in. And I think, it starts with a theme that you've heard throughout from panelists, and I think, Amani, you had it right up there on your slide. It's believing in yourself. I think there's actually a scene in Harry Potter where Harry can conjure a Patronus because he knows he did it before. And I can't drive home how important it is to believe in yourself and know you can. Resiliency in yourself can help in everything. Resiliency and looking around at the world at us and go, we're an amazing species when it comes to resiliency. And if you look at what people can survive in past and thrive in, it is phenomenal, right? I think the second is, really this is when your network comes in, your family, your friends, others, right? I think I found that there were people that were missing in my life that I needed to get through this, and really reaching out and not being shy, and don't believe you can do it alone, because no one does it alone. Ideally, anyone had a choice in the history of humans, we chose to go it together. And take care of yourself. I think one of the fallacies that we've unfortunately bred, especially in academics and STEM, is the people who are the best are working to their bones. No, the people who are at their best are the ones who take the best care of themselves, so the best of them comes out. This is brain work, right? This is ideation and innovation, and we need to be at our best. So, and then the other thing that really is important is focus on your strengths. And actually, I do this with all my clients, organizations, anyone is, anytime you're trying to solve something, the best is to come from a place of your strengths. And so when push comes to shove and you feel that you're the worst, sometimes you can't see the light ahead, you have strengths, and it's really important to look to those and really say, how do I leverage them to bring them up? And then, we do persevere. I started my firm during this. I have a lovely life I've created, and it's been wonderful. And you kind of go piece by piece, and you find that way out. But it's really important in those moments to remember that.
Wow, what an incredible story. And I'm so sorry that you went through so many challenges, but I'm so glad to hear you talking about taking care of yourself. And really, one of the best pieces of advice that I got when I was going through my own challenges was that you're not just creating a career, you're creating a life. And so we do have that really bad idea of, thinking that we have to work ourselves to the bone to get anywhere, but it shouldn't be like that. And realistically, being a scientist encompasses so many different aspects of my life that it shouldn't have to be, to the point where it doesn't bring me joy anymore. So I'm so glad that you made it through that. And I know we are all very grateful for your insight and your expertise sharing with us today. So thank you for that. And next we have Amani.
Ooh, hardships. So I'd like to preface this with saying that I am a firm believer that when you experience hardships, you come out better and stronger at the end of them. So no matter what the hardships are that you're experiencing, as long as you can learn from them and figure out how to not end up back in that same position, how you've evolved as a person as you've experienced this hardship, then you beat the hardship. Like you are the winner in that situation. Um, the two hardships that I'd say I've had the hardest time with are believing in myself and being the only woman of color in a lot of my classes, or in the career that I wanted to go into. I actually had a professor tell me in college that I should rethink the career that I was pursuing because I wasn't doing well in a class that was 3 hour-and-a-half exams and that was your whole grade. And the professor basically said you should rethink your course load and you should rethink the career you're going into because it's going to require that you can do better than how you're doing in this class. Um, and that was really hard to hear because I was hearing this from someone who I considered to be in a high position, and had previously respected. And then they were here telling me that I needed to rethink what I wanted to do because they clearly didn't believe in me. And that's where like one of my mentors came in. I told her and she was like, don't listen to this person because this person only knows you based off exams and that's it. They don't work with you. They don't know you as a person. They only know you as being able to memorize information and then put it down on a sheet of paper. And so, dealing with that self-doubt has been super hard. And that I remember that email, like I remember reading it, I could probably recite it word for word. And so I have to constantly remind myself that I am doing the career that they didn't think I could do. I'm doing really well in it, given my age. And I beat them in that situation. I proved them wrong. And the second hardship has to do with being the only woman of color. So the way that I overcame that was having a really great group of friends who recognized that I was the only woman of color in my classes and who supported me and let me vent. And I didn't feel as alone as I could have. And I co-founded Minorities in Shark Sciences because I didn't want other women to feel the way that I felt for all 4 years of my undergrad. So that's what this bottom picture is here. This is just a couple of them, but we have over 200 members that are women of color that are either in shark science or interested in pursuing it. And it makes me feel great that I'm giving them a resource and a community of women of color so they know they're not alone, but they're also making me feel less alone, which has definitely helped me in my career. So figuring out how to go at those hardships and how to create a solution to the hardships that you're experiencing is super important for yourself and for other people as well.
Absolutely. And again, I'm sorry that, you had that professor tell you that you couldn't, have a career in STEM because clearly you've proved them wrong. But I think that's also a really big thing is remembering that there are some people who have had more straightforward paths into STEM. But most women and most women of color do not have that story. And so I think that's why it's so important to have mentors that can relate to your experiences and remind you that, again, some person may just base you off of your exams, but that's not who you are. So I think that's fantastic. And next we have Jolene.
So yeah, again, obviously I've had various periods of hardship throughout my career. I mean, who gets through a life that's 40 something years long and never has any issues, right? But probably the one that stands out the most right now is the one that is just the constant challenge that I have as a mother. So I did not start my PhD until I was 38 years old. And then approximately 6 months into that journey, I got pregnant and had a baby in the middle of my PhD. And so he is 4 now. And just that balance between, being the mom and being the scientist is never over. It's constant. It's always going. And it's just a thing, I guess I wouldn't necessarily think, I don't currently consider it to be a hardship, but I do think, it's a challenge that I have continuously had to work to overcome.
Absolutely. Well, I will say you do have quite a cute little boy. So I'm sure that, I think you make such a good point about how we shouldn't have to sacrifice family and the things that we value and are important to us and the important life, events in our lives that really make us who we are for academia. So I know I definitely look up to you, and I'm grateful for your story too, because I think we like to have this very linear path into STEM and say that, you know, you should have your PhD by a certain age and you should be in this particular career by a certain age, but realistically it's what we make it, right? And I think that's the biggest point, is that, you know, we don't need to just limit people who, you know, can't necessarily follow that linear path, because realistically most people's path is not linear. So I think that's a really good point that you bring up. So next I will say, I do want to leave quite a bit of time for questions at the end and for advice, but we are going to talk briefly about how do you see attitudes towards women changing in STEM fields as a whole. So first up, we have Amani.
It's Julie. That's okay. As we've talked about before, I've been in marine science and particularly fisheries biology for close to 20 years now. And I can remember really being one of the only women in the room in the early 2000s. And now obviously there are just so many more. Like I said, I just finished my PhD less than a year ago, and 90% of the students in the College of Marine Science at the University of South Florida, where I went, were female. And so I think there is a real shift just in demographics total at least the low to mid career level. And, you know, hopefully that will continue to translate into women just having more of a voice and more of a seat at the table as time goes on.
Absolutely. And next we have Shefali. Sorry, my slides got a little mixed.
Okay. So yeah, I think similar to Julie, and I've been working in this field for almost 20 years. It's better, you know, probably not a huge shock. And I went into agriculture, stats, economics. I was the only woman in the room in many situations. I was often the only person of color, unless I happened to be working in Africa or India, right, or somewhere in Asia. And even then, actually, it can be stunning how lack of diversity, you know, we would have. And I think that, so, you know, it's important to keep in mind a lot has changed just even the last few years. I am shocked that even between starting my business in 2017 and now, most of my clients are actually led by women, or women, not by any selection. It just happens to be the people who are leading and driving change. However, this is that but, which is we have a lot, and we say attitudes, representation is not enough. The attitude and mindset that actually allows people to be at their best, that allows us to have, especially I look at academia, to allow everyone to be able to contribute and be at their best, that there's still quite a bit that has to go. And I think one other thing that's really important is STEM as a big umbrella. Depending on where you go. So there are a lot of fields like physics and a lot of the other sciences. I think frankly, economics, stats, some of these, we're still really at mathematics seeing a lag, you know. So I think in some parts of STEM, we've seen a huge increase. And thankfully with the younger generations, you guys have jumped in, and I want to see more of that kind of self-support, tutoring, bringing up, but we have a lot to do. I think the second piece there that's really important is there is a belief that we have to adopt the system that's there. And I think the reality is that system didn't serve anyone well. And that's actually the fallacy that I think that I hope changes the most, which is a system that is more inclusive, more supportive. I just got an article from my employee, Elena. So my first employee I hired happened to be a woman, and she's on there. She's amazing. And she runs our podcast, but she sent me something on Vanguard STEM. And it was started to support BIPOC scientists. And if you read it, you realize everything she says about mentorship in Vanguard STEM helps everybody. So what we're talking about is we need to change the attitude that this is better for us all, as opposed to believing it's better because we are women or people of color. What we want is an environment that gets actually the best of us out the door. And I think if we can get to that place from a mindset perspective, I think then we can actually say something is sustaining and will change.
Absolutely. I couldn't say that better myself. That's fantastic. And next we have Amani.
Yeah, so I mean, I agree with what both of them have said. I put it at the top of my slide. I see STEM changing just with more acceptance and representation in STEM fields, especially of women and of women of color. I've been lucky enough to have basically all female mentors who have been amazing. And some people will have all male mentors, and male mentors are amazing mentors, but it is something that I know I lacked as a kid was having role models who looked like me in certain careers. And I definitely like didn't think I could do shark science as a kid because I didn't see any women of color succeeding in shark science. And kids really look up to people who look like them. And there's this like unconscious thing that happens in kids' minds where they're like, oh, I don't see anyone who looks like me, therefore I can't do that. And so the whole thing of like more acceptance and more representation is huge. And I also agree with the mindset also has to change. You can have as many women as you want in a career, but if the mindset isn't that they are at an equal level and equally as good as their job as other males in the field, then is anything really changing? Like, are things getting better for the women in the field? And these are just like some pictures of the amazing women and female shark scientists that I know and love and have been all mentors to me. Some of them are my age and I consider them a mentor and a role model, and some of them are older than me. Yeah.
For sure. And I think that's such, everybody's bringing up such good points of it's not just, representation is so essential, but it really does have to be a mindset shift in this field. Like we can keep adding more people into the field, but unless we make it a more accommodating field for everybody, we're going to continue to lose amazing scientists who should be here, but just don't feel welcome. So I think, you all bring up really fantastic points. And last but not least, we have Lela.
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of add on the point that Dr. Shefali made on building up with more representation, and also kind of what Olivia touched on as well. And coming in from like that younger generation and student perspective, kind of gaining that understanding that the system that we have doesn't suit everyone, right? It doesn't suit a lot of us, and it's not built for that. And so there are other paths that we can take. And so I see a lot more student-based support in, telling others about the different paths that you can take and how you can take them, especially in younger middle and high school girls, in giving them proper exposure to different STEM-based pathways and the potential for innovation, and also helping them to start a passion project or read up on something that intrigues them to basically pursue, right? A lot of what we see and a lot of the exposure that we have starting from when we're young is in the classroom. And so especially like in something that I've noticed in my last 4 years of high school, not only with getting older, but with also looking back on students younger than me, right? Kind of also, some of the roles that I've had in mentoring younger students, helping them with paper write-ups and helping them, start off even like cold emailing other people to talk about, starting research positions in places that they're interested in. I've seen that shift, right? In which we're able to acknowledge the support that we're getting from teachers and other individuals for not only first generation college students, but pretty much any students who want to emerge in the STEM field of their choice. And so kind of touching upon what Amani said, also proper representation and voice for those who need that right backing. That's something that's super important, and hopefully something that we can keep on pursuing as we move on into the future.
Absolutely. And now I know we're getting towards the end of our time. So I want to give you each a chance to give advice to students who may be interested in pursuing a similar career to you. And first, we're going to go with Julie.
Yeah, I mean, my advice is super simple, and it's just to go for it. If there's something out there that you have a passion for and you love it, just go for it. Just make sure to assemble your team of supporters and follow that dream.
Absolutely. That's fantastic advice. Now, next, how about Lela? What advice would you have for students?
Yeah, so I would say don't be afraid to put yourself out there, because the worst that can happen, at least coming in from a student's perspective, is that things will be exactly the same as they were earlier. For example, I've gotten to where I am today from a lot of cold emailing, setting up those important conversations and gaining those mentorship connections. And like the worst thing that someone can say is, oh no, sorry. But then things where you are in your path, you'll be at exactly the same place that you were, and you can find ways to move forward, right? It's not the end of the world. And also be assertive, which I know is kind of like a sad thing to say, because women in STEM shouldn't have to really find ways to specifically drive themselves and assert themselves forward. But like, don't let someone speak over you in a meeting or put you in a shadow. Like, you should continually try for those opportunities and follow up with people after conversations and hold others accountable for their actions. Because at the end of the day, you really have to set foot for yourself, especially, trying to move forward. And also make sure you have fun and enjoy what you're doing, because, you know, as we mentioned earlier, right, this is something that you're going to be like, you're planning on doing as your life, right? So finding that balance and having fun and enjoying it is really important also.
Absolutely. And while you may be having challenges at the time, it may discourage you. That's where it's like, it's so important to have mentors to remind you, like, what do you enjoy about this still? Because if you're not finding any joy in it anymore, then it might be time to take a different pathway. But if it's really just a challenge that you're going through in that moment, then of course your mentors can help you kind of get through that and realize, no, like you actually do love this. It's just a really hard time right now. So next we have Amani.
So my overarching advice is to take every opportunity that is thrown your way, even if it is in a part of a career that you don't want to go into, even if it might be boring to you. Any skills that you gain in absolutely any experience is going to be applicable in your life and most likely in your career. I worked in a lab all 4 years, and it was completely in an area I didn't want to go into. But from that, I got all of these different skills that I could put on my resume that then future lab managers were like, oh, this is amazing that she knows how to do this. Putting yourself in positions and actively creating opportunities for yourself, or putting yourself in a place where someone will offer you an opportunity, is really important. Rarely are opportunities just dropped at your feet. You have to consistently put yourself in a position where people want to give them to you. And most importantly, don't ever let anyone tell you that you can't do something. If you really want to do something, you can absolutely do it, and you can figure out a way to make it your own.
I love that advice. And I think that's kind of a resounding theme, is that don't let anybody stand in your way if this is what you truly want to do. And I think that's something that, you know, there is a good balance between sometimes like you have to kind of pull the seat up to the table and force yourself there. But other times you have to realize when certain spaces aren't healthy for you or aren't what you're trying to achieve. Like there comes a point in time when you have to realize maybe there's a different pathway that I can take where I can still be achieving everything that I want to, but maybe less resistance that I have to face. So I think everybody has given such fantastic advice so far. And now I want to go to the Q&A section, but I do want to show that there is a way for you to connect with all of our amazing STEM experts. So here's all of their social that you can see, that you can connect with them later. But let's move to the Q&A really quick, because I think there's some really good questions in here. So the first one is, I know getting these types of positions are competitive, and I imagine organizations want to see that candidates are a team. Oh, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. We're having some skipping slides here. Shefali, I am so sorry about that. Do you want to give us your advice?
I was gonna say, don't even worry. I'll real quickly, because I can maybe fold it into the team question that's been asked. But I mean, so I think we covered be open, take risks, believe in yourself. One thing I will say that I've noticed, it's actually a really sad thing as you get older, is you don't hear yourself as well. And I've watched so many people, and what I mean that is, it's more than saying that you don't set limitations, and that it's literally saying, who am I and what makes me happy? And I know, unfortunately, maybe this is just a thing that happens in 40s, maybe 50s, but people who realize and look around and go, did I just live someone else's life or did I live my own? And I'll be honest, it gets harder. If I followed all the advice that had been given to me, oh, I wouldn't be here. I probably would have failed entirely. So I think the biggest thing is you really have to hear your own voice at any point and know what is right for you, what drives you, what makes you happy, and really follow that. And there are going to be a lot of times where that doesn't jive with what's around you. But if you want me to lead in, I'll go and lead into maybe that team question, because I think it's a great one. And I think of, you know, yes, team dynamics, working with people is so critical in almost every field. Even in economics, I spent a lot of days in windowless offices studying by myself. But, you know, at the end of the day, for us to be successful, and I've hired a lot of people, and I would say the team dynamics and the personal interaction are the top. That really, unfortunately, it takes, or fortunately, takes the bag. So it is demonstrated in any activity. You can be from, I think, both Amani and Lela talked about like supporting those who come behind them, and through the work they've done at any point in your career, you're showing team player and team dynamics through that. You're doing it through sports teams, and it's being able to, I mean, I really think it comes out, it can be in any venue, you can create it. I think it's a matter of you wanting to create it and actually being able to show the outcomes of it.
That's all fantastic. Thank you so much. Yes, that is really good advice for anybody listening, especially who's interested in getting into this field more. So with that, I also want to ask, we have a question from Gracie from Kettering Middle School, and she wants to know, what is the most exciting moment that has happened in your career? So I'll let each of you take a stab at that one. So Lela, do you want to start first?
Yeah, so I would say it all started with the diving, right? And being in Hawaii, it was like my first time underwater was definitely something that was like mind blowing. But to me, it was when I got my advanced certification after I had started some research stuff. I would say, doing cave dives and night dives, they were absolutely terrifying for me. I don't like the fact that you cannot see past the flashlight beam. Sometimes it can be a bit terrifying, but I will say those first moments where I was actually able to, fully explore the reef to its full potential. And then, all the gears in my brain started turning. I started to think of like, what can I do with this? There's so much. And to me, that was probably like the start of it all, but also one of the most exciting moments.
I love that. And yes, night dives are a whole other beast entirely. And they're so much fun, but those first couple of dives are it's quite a learning curve. So I think that's fantastic. What about Shefali? What is your most memorable career event?
I'm going to go with, so in 2019, I had a chance to testify in front of Congress on behalf of the corn growers on soil health, and it was amazing. On so many levels. That they had enough faith in me to testify on their behalf, but really to be able to talk about what the farmers of the country do for soil, just to be part of this process. I'm a nerdy little Indian girl from Connecticut who is an introvert and never thought I would be up front. And I guess that's actually been an amazing part of the career transition, is to be going from kind of behind the computer to in front. I want to be able to talk and have pictures like you guys do at Sharks. I didn't have a lot of photos of me working because it's really me at the computer, me talking, but testifying in front of Congress. And I think though the arc was, I actually got to give a commencement address to my College of Ag, where I got my PhD almost 10 years to the date. They invited me as a keynote speaker. And I remember it was the first time I spoke that publicly, and I was nervous. So right then, to be able to do that, to testify, really kind of, I know, it just changed the way that I saw myself and how I can contribute, but also just was amazing to get that chance.
That's absolutely amazing. And I think it's so cool to see. I mean, we all have our field work, but sometimes we don't always get to see how it actually plays into policy and real people's lives. And so I think that's a fantastic point. And I think that's amazing that you went and testified. I think that's so cool. And last we have Amani.
Oh man. All right. So my favorite career experience was the first time that we caught and worked up a hammerhead. It was 11 feet. It was the largest shark and hammerhead that I have ever seen. And long story short, hammerheads get stressed out really fast when you do workups on them. So workup consists of drawing blood, taking a little muscle sample, measuring them, doing all these different measurements. And so you have to do the workup super fast. I think we did that workup in under 3 minutes on this huge hammerhead shark. And the whole time it was like crazy adrenaline. I was running around, like getting all these measurements. And we watched it release, and it swam off exactly how you want a shark to swim off after you work them up. And after, I was just smiling from ear to ear for like 5 minutes. Like I was like, did that just happen? Did I really just see a hammerhead like that large? I'm losing my mind. And I think you can probably tell that like I still feel that way because of how I'm talking about it right now. Yeah, that was absolutely my favorite, most memorable experience.
That is so cool. And I honestly can't even imagine working on a shark that large, considering that's like 2 times my body size. So that's fantastic. That is really amazing. And so now I want to thank all of you who have been on the panel. I know Julie had to leave us a little early, but I want to thank you all so much for contributing and for sharing your stories and your challenges and your advice. I think every one of us can learn so much from your experiences. And I just hope that everybody can keep up with them by following their socials or emailing them directly, because each of these amazing women have definitely been so open to helping support anyone who is interested in getting into these fields. So thank you all so much for giving us your time today. Now, if you want to stay connected with EarthEcho, you can find us on our social media channels. You can visit earthecho.org to find out more information about all of our exciting programs, including upcoming virtual events just like this one. And if you are on YouTube, don't forget to hit that subscribe button before you go. Now with that, on behalf of EarthEcho International, thank you so much for joining us and keep exploring.